In the heart of a vibrant city, Marie lived a life that many would describe as ordinary, yet within her lay a profound sense of disillusionment. A single mother navigating the complexities of raising her young son amidst a hectic job, she often felt the weight of societal expectations bearing down on her. Growing up in a family that preached traditional values, Marie had always been taught certain beliefs about life, faith, and the sanctity of existence. However, as she faced personal challenges and heartbreaks, her faith began to wane. Despite her struggles, Marie was not entirely lost. She clung to her principles, albeit with an air of skepticism. Conversations surrounding life and death often left her uncomfortable, her defenses raised against discussions of spirituality or divine intervention. She would brush off these topics with dismissive remarks, more intent on living a practical life than a spiritual one. Her friends and co-workers often supported her viewpoints, reinforcing a worldview that viewed existence through a pragmatic lens. However, all of this changed one fateful evening when Marie faced a life-threatening situation that took her to the edge of death. In that moment, she would come face to face with a reality she had long suppressed, igniting a spiritual awakening that would challenge everything she thought she knew. Would you take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share where you're from? I am Marie, and what I am about to share with you altered the very core of my being. It all began on an ordinary evening. The bustling city around me felt alive, yet I was numb, entangled in the routine of daily errands. As I drove home, caught in the worries of bills and responsibilities, a sudden loss of control sent my car spiraling. The world turned into a blur of colors and sounds, and before I knew it, darkness enveloped me. In that infinite void, I experienced something I never could have fathomed. I was pulled from my body, sensing a disconnect from my physical form. I floated, suspended in a light that was both warm and immensely comforting. It felt like home. This wasn't just a light, it was an embrace of pure love. I saw visions, images replaying the lives of those I had loved and lost, moments of joy intertwined with sorrow. Yet amidst this whirlwind of thoughts, a different vision unfolded before me, one that would seep into my consciousness and ripple through my spirit. I became aware of the souls of unborn children, their cries not of despair, but of an ethereal longing. Each spirit radiated a unique essence, some filled with kindness, others longing for a chance at life. I witnessed the pain they experienced, feelings of rejection and misunderstanding in a world that had not yet welcomed them. My heart ached for them, and I couldn't reconcile this truth with my previous beliefs. I felt fear and confusion bubble within me, a resistance to the revelation that spiraled through my mind like a raging storm. This experience shattered the barriers I had built. Upon regaining consciousness in the hospital, my heart raced not with fear, but with an overwhelming sense of responsibility. A truth I had not wanted to acknowledge broke through the chaos of my thoughts. Every life holds intrinsic value, even those lost before they could take a breath. I grappled with my beliefs. The echoes of this experience clashed with the staunch views I held around life and choice. Over the following weeks, I found myself wrestling with my emotions. Conversations with my friends began to feel stale, as they remained rooted in their accustomed ideologies, questioning my sudden change in perspective. "Are you really going to believe that nonsense?" my best friend Samantha asked one night over coffee, her skepticism piercing the new light I was trying to embrace. "Marie, you're being naive. Life is complicated. Not everything is black and white." It was as if a chasm had opened between us. I felt isolated, my thoughts spinning in isolation, yet desperate for understanding. Each time we met, I could sense the tension thickening in the air as I attempted to navigate my new understanding. My colleagues noticed my distraction, and my family began to voice their concern. "You're losing who you are," my mom said gently, a tinge of worry in her voice. "You just had a traumatic experience. Maybe it's affecting your mind." But deep down, I knew this change was profound. I had glimpsed a reality where love was not only foundational but pervasive, impacting every living soul. Yet with each revelation came an internal conflict, a push and pull that left me questioning not just my beliefs but also my relationships. I was on the precipice of discovery, and I had to find solid ground. What path would I choose? The internal turmoil I faced began to manifest in my everyday life, creating friction in my relationships. While I dug deeper into my new understanding, my conversations with others often felt increasingly off-kilter. I longed to share my profound revelations, but the very thought of their disapproving gazes left me paralyzed. I sought wisdom in the Scripture, uncovering passages that spoke about the value of life, the divine purpose each soul carries, and the unquantifiable love of God. Yet, in discussions with others, my newfound insights often fell on deaf ears. One particularly daunting evening, I invited a group of friends to my home. My heart buzzed with anxious energy as I prepared to unveil my journey and the truths I had come to embrace. Eyes lit up with curiosity, but anticipation quickly gave way to disbelief as I shared my experience. "You're saying you actually saw these souls? Marie, that's unbelievable!" exclaimed Kevin, his laughter echoing through the room. An unwelcomed wave of shame washed over me as I felt my vulnerability exposed. "I can't expect everyone to understand," I reminded myself, but my heart ached for acceptance. The evening turned into a battleground of minds, each specter of doubt laced with ridicule emerging from my friends. Discussions about practicality versus faith sparked heated debates. I felt as though I were standing alone in a dark chasm, fighting for my voice amidst the cacophony. And as the night wore on, I realized that even those close to me could not fathom the depth of my experience, nor the change it had ignited within me. But then something unexpected happened. My grandmother, who had remained silently in the corner, leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "Marie," she said softly, "I believe you. I've had my own moments too, where faith pierced through my doubts." The room quieted as my grandmother recounted her own near-death experience, sharing her previous encounter with the divine, a moment that reshaped her own beliefs about life and death. Her voice was soothing, resonating deeply, and instilling hope back into my heart. With her support, I began to gather my bearings, seeking solace in prayer, searching for a deeper meaning in my newfound path. But resistance lingered in the air as criticisms from previous conversations replayed in my mind. At home, my 5-year-old son Lucas could sense my turmoil even amidst his playful laughs. "Mommy, are you okay?" he would ask, sensing my emotional ebb and flow. In those moments, I was reminded of my duty not merely to uphold my beliefs, but to also guide him in love, acceptance, and understanding. As weeks turned into months, I embraced these confrontations as a catalyst for growth, unveiling fresh perspectives not only for myself, but for others. My journey became a quest to illuminate the sanctity of every life, urging conversations around empathy, understanding, and the transformative power of faith. But those discussions were not without complications. I faced harsh judgment from friends who pulled away, fearing the change they perceived, and I also began to notice a rift forming between my newfound beliefs and the people I once held dear. As tension simmered, my heart wrestled with the desire to hold on to the fragments of my past while longing for this emerging understanding. Yet through it all, I remained steadfast in my resolve to navigate these challenges. In my moments of quiet reflection, I began to write down the essence of my encounter, preparing a narrative not just for myself, but for others who may have faced the same crossroads. My experiences were no longer just my own. They were threads woven into a bigger story, a tapestry of faith, conviction, and most importantly, love. It was within this chaos that I unknowingly prepared myself for an even greater upheaval that loomed on the horizon. As I continued to document my journey, I found myself increasingly compelled to share the revelations that had transformed my life. I felt an urgency to reach others, especially those grappling with difficult moral dilemmas surrounding life and choice. With each story I penned, I imagined how it might resonate with a soul seeking understanding amidst confusion. Yet, for every small triumph I experienced in expressing my newfound beliefs, the opposing forces in my life seemed to intensify. My relationship with Samantha, once solid and filled with laughter, grew strained. Her disbelief often manifested in blunt remarks that stung far deeper than she realized. "You're being brainwashed, Marie. This experience has twisted your view of reality," she stated during one exchanged email, a pang of pain striking my heart. How could she not see the profound change within me? I sensed that if we didn't confront this chasm between us soon, it could deepen irrevocably. Armed with patience and courage, I decided to reach out to her. That weekend, I invited her over, determined to create a space for an open dialogue. As we sat across from each other in my cozy living room, a sense of apprehension settled between us. I took a deep breath before sharing my heart, recounting not just my experience, but the emotions and revelations that followed. It was more than just a story. It was a plea for understanding. Samantha listened, her expression a mix of skepticism and genuine concern. I could see the gears turning in her mind as I spoke, revealing the intricate tapestry of my awakened perception. "Marie, I can't deny that something extraordinary happened to you, but to suggest that every soul matters, even those who never had a chance." Her voice trailed off, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "How can you reconcile that with what you once believed?" "I can't say it's easy," I confessed, fighting to suppress the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. But facing the reality of these souls ignited a compassion in me that I never knew existed. What if embracing the depth of love means accepting the existence of every soul, especially the ones lost too soon? As the conversation deepened, the tension in the room gradually subsided, allowing for a rich exchange of ideas that forged new pathways for understanding. Although we had differing perspectives, I saw cracks in the armor of disbelief she had built. She began questioning her own belief systems, and I felt hope spark between us like a fragile flame. However, those small victories were juxtaposed with challenges from my family. My mother remained skeptical about my experiences, continuously trying to pull me back to a comfortable narrative. "You're sounding like one of those zealots, Marie. Let's not get carried away," she often remarked, concern lining her features. With every heartfelt conversation, I sensed her fears hovering over me, afraid that I was losing myself to this newfound faith. But the most significant challenge emerged from within: my internal struggle with guilt. Each day, I felt a nagging pull as I reflected on my past choices and relationships, especially regarding my decision to have an abortion in my early 20s. The knowledge from my near-death experience weighed heavily on me. Some mornings, I'd wake up feeling the heaviness suffocating my spirit as I grappled with the notion of forgiveness and redemption. Could I truly embrace my past mistakes while seeking a new path forward? A breakthrough came unexpectedly one night as I lay awake, unable to sleep. In a moment of deep introspection, I turned to prayer, pouring out my grief and remorse like a river flowing from my soul. In that vulnerable state, a voice of reassurance whispered truths into my heart. God's love is infinite, capable of encompassing even the darkest of pasts. I allowed tears to flow freely, embracing a long overdue release of burdens I had clung to for far too long. I realized then that what I had perceived as a fault was, instead, an opportunity for redemption. My past did not define me. Rather, it molded me into the person I was meant to become. This nod of self-forgiveness opened a new chapter in my transformational story, urging me to embrace the weight of my experience, not with shame, but with a renewed purpose to advocate for life and compassion. It wasn't long before this revelation became a catalyst for yet another chapter in my journey. Inspired by the stories of lost souls I had witnessed during my near-death experience, I felt called to channel my experiences into advocacy work, speaking out against abortion while emphasizing compassion, support, and the value of every life. Yet, as my mission flourished, the community around me began to shift. Friends who had long been skeptical, including Samantha, started reaching out in curiosity, wanting to know more about this newfound path. They too were wrestling with conflicting beliefs and sought wisdom in a world that often seemed devoid of it. I began to understand that as I forged ahead, my story could bridge the gap between differing perspectives, creating a platform for respectful discussions on the sanctity of life, healing, and the power of forgiveness. The challenges I faced only fueled my resolve as I broke through barriers, inviting others to join me on this journey of discovery and enlightenment. But little did I know, a significant confrontation loomed on the horizon, a moment that would test the very foundation of my transformation, challenging me to stand firm in all I had learned. Months passed, and as my journey of advocacy continued, I felt a growing sense of purpose fueling my efforts. I began organizing community events to discuss the sanctity of life, inviting experts and individuals with compelling stories to share. I wanted to create a safe haven for open dialogue, bridging the gap between differing beliefs while emphasizing empathy and understanding. With each event, a virtuous cycle emerged. People began sharing their stories, and I listened intently, feeling their pain and healing intertwining with my own experiences. However, as my public profile began to rise in the community, so did the scrutiny from various factions that opposed my views. Critics emerged, eager to challenge my narrative and intentions. Social media became an arena of verbal warfare, where my words were dissected and misconstrued. "She's just a woman seeking attention," some claimed, while others labeled me a fanatic, disregarding the authenticity of my journey. Then came the day that shattered my resolve. I had organized a major event, an open forum that aimed to discuss both the moral and emotional implications of abortion, inviting speakers from both sides of the discussion. I stood backstage, heart pounding with nervous anticipation. As the audience entered, I glimpsed the apprehension in their eyes, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. But I brushed off my anxiety, fueled by the hope that this dialogue could foster understanding and growth. The event commenced, and the atmosphere was electric, charged with the potential for genuine interaction. I took the stage, sharing my experience in a heartfelt monologue that documented my spiritual awakening. As I recounted the vision of the lost souls, I could see glimmers of recognition among many attendees. Yet, as I looked out at the audience, my heart sank as I spotted a group of my former friends, including Samantha, seated with arms crossed, their expressions hardened. Midway through the forum, a prominent activist known for her strong pro-choice stance took the stage. She spoke with fierce conviction, weaving heart-wrenching anecdotes that prompted emotional responses from the audience. I could feel the tension rising palpably in the room as she challenged the very foundations I had come to embrace. When the time came for questions, one of my old friends stood up, raising her voice against the tide of the conversation. "Marie, do you truly believe that every situation is black and white? What about the women who face unimaginable circumstances?" The room fell silent, and I felt the weight of her words like a stone upon my heart. The anger mingled with shame, battling with my conviction for a truthful response. I believe that every life has worth, and I understand that circumstances can be incredibly challenging, I began, my voice trembling. My experiences have shown me that there are alternatives, support systems and communities ready to embrace and uplift those in need. The audience erupted in murmurs. Some were supportive while others jeered. My former friends stared intently, their faces masks of displeasure and disbelief. It wasn't just my views they were rejecting, it felt like they were rejecting me. Digging deep, I continued. What I witnessed during my near-death experience opened my heart to the incredible beauty of life, even when it is cloaked in uncertainty. I implore us to remember that every choice comes with a consequence, not just for the mothers but for their unborn children who long for a chance. My voice grew stronger, resonating with an urgency I had seldom felt before. Yet, as I shared my narrative of love, compassion, and choice, it became clear that my words incited dissent. Voices pierced the air as some in the audience shouted in protest, and others rallied behind my message. The borne-out emotions sparked heated debates, igniting a wildfire of tension that threatened to engulf the entire forum. "Marie, your naivety is dangerous," Samantha yelled through the din, her eyes aflame. "You can't ignore the realities women face. You're making it sound easy when it's not." At that moment, everything hung in balance. I recognized that while I had an unyielding message, delivering it could fracture friendships and even ignite hostility within the very community I sought to heal. A wave of self-doubt coursed through me. Could I continue to advocate for what I believed in, knowing it could alienate those I held dear? The emotional pressure peaked, and in that instant of vulnerability, I took a careful breath. I chose honesty over pretense. I know my experience is not universal. I can't claim to have all the answers. I am merely one voice among many, yearning for a conversation rooted in empathy over judgment. The sincerity in my words surprised even me, and although nerves gnawed at my insides, I stood my ground. Clasps of hands filled the room with applause, signaling not unanimous agreement but a shared recognition of the brave act of daring to speak one's truth. Some remained skeptical, yet a ripple effect encouraged others to rise, sharing their stories of loss, regret, and rediscovery, a tapestry of human experience unfolding before us. As the dust of that event began to settle, I realized that confrontation was a necessary facet of growth. My journey wouldn't guarantee acceptance from everyone, nor could it shield me from criticism. But if there was one truth I had learned through my near-death experience, it was about embracing love, compassion, and the willingness to engage deeply with those caught in life's complexities. Even amidst resistance, a sense of freedom washed over me as I began to recognize that every encounter, every voice, was an opportunity to extend grace. Through every pushback, I felt a responsibility to navigate veiled territory, immersed now in the beautiful messiness of human connections. I was slowly understanding that true transformation beckoned. All around me was an intricate dance, awaiting my next movements. But as acceptance began to bloom in unexpected places, a challenging moment loomed closer, threatening to redefine my journey once more, pushing me toward a crucial decision that would test every lesson I had learned. As the days unfolded after the forum, I found a flicker of renewed determination in my heart. Each conversation that followed the event was marked by tension, but also by openings of understanding I hadn't anticipated. I began to see my role not only as an advocate, but also as a facilitator of discussions that sought to embrace the complex narrative surrounding life, choice, and faith. Yet, with the exhilaration of progress came the shadows of doubt creeping in. When I attended my next community meeting, I could feel the weight of the tension that had emerged from the recent event clinging like a dense fog over the discussions. SAM, the Society for Advancement of Mothers, was hosting a gathering, and I was invited to share my perspective. Though my heart raced with anticipation, I felt the specter of dissent lingering in the air. As I took the stage, I was met with wary glances and crossed arms. Knowing their motivations stemmed from a sincere desire to protect women, I felt a swell of empathy. "I understand this topic is fraught with emotion," I began, "and I want to honor all the experiences here today." But as I shared my insights, I could see the discontent ripple through the crowd. It became one of those moments where every word felt heavy. They might misinterpret my intentions behind the sheer passion I expressed. The tension escalated further when one woman in the audience openly challenged my perspective. "You're right, Marie. It's easy to speak about hope when you've never walked in those shoes. You don't know the pressure, the pain, the fear." Her voice quivered with raw emotion, leaving no facade to hide behind. The room punctured with silence, and my own heart raced, a cold sweat forming on my brow. In that moment I could easily slip into the defensive, but I chose another path. I thanked her for her honesty, acknowledging that I hadn't walked her journey. I can only relate my own experience, my insights born from pain, confusion, and ultimately redemption. But I believe that we can create a world filled with understanding, one where there is space for both concern and compassion. Yet suddenly, I was acutely aware of another layer hiding beneath the surface, my own responsibility to those I advocated for, especially women navigating difficult decisions. I had to acknowledge the emotional turmoil they faced in ways I could only imagine. The moment became pivotal for me, depicted in sharp relief. The collision of conviction and understanding lay at the heart of every advocacy journey. As I discussed my vision for a supportive community, a few members began to show signs of restraint. I pursued them gently, opening the discussion wider, allowing stories, conflicting sentiments, and beliefs to flow freely. What emerged were not just stark contrasts to my own views, but echoes of empathy intertwined within their stories, an intricate dance between sorrow, fear, and yearning for choice, a desire for love and understanding. However, amid the blossoming discussions, I felt turbulence brewing within my own family. My mother was increasingly vocal about her disdain for my advocacy work, believing that I was walking too far on precarious ground. "Marie, I worry you're losing touch with reality," she told me one evening over dinner, bitterness creeping into her voice. "These stories of loss, they aren't your burden to carry. You need to think of your own life and your son." It struck a nerve, creating an almost insurmountable distance between us. "Mom, I can't ignore what I've learned. I have seen the life that every soul deserves, the chance to fulfill their purpose within God's broader tapestry." My tone was firm, yet filled with determination. They deserve advocates who will fight for them in a world that can often feel unforgiving. As her expression hardened, I felt sorrow pulse through me. This was the last thing I wanted, to sever ties with my family. Yet the need to stay true to my beliefs, to give voice to the voiceless, filled me with an urgency I could not quell. A soft voice echoed in my heart, reminding me to approach every conversation with grace, and I gently tapped into that spirit. Through many sleepless nights, I remained committed to exploring how to weave together the opposing narratives of hope and healing with the undeniable realities of individual choice. I once again turned to the scriptures for solace, seeking God's guidance. My heart felt stretched, yearning to find intersections that breathed understanding into polarized views. Then came the moment I'd been dreading. My mother's birthday approached, and she had invited me to gather with family. Recognizing that this was an opportunity to bridge the rift, I prepared myself mentally, heart pounding with both anticipation and fear. When I arrived, I could feel the tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Yet amidst the bubbling discomfort, I was determined to listen first. As my mother blew out the candles on her cake, surrounded by family and light, my heart softened. I could sense a yearning for connection beneath her stern demeanor, suggesting that perhaps my choice to embrace the unspoken darkness of my past was meant not just for the world outside, but to illuminate the path back toward my family. Throughout the evening, I engaged with siblings and cousins, gently leading conversations towards the complexities around choice and the sanctity of life. Much to my surprise, their initial reactions softened gradually, opening the door for shared experiences about love and loss. I could see the depth of their feelings reflected in their responses. As dessert settled, I approached my mother, my heart racing. "Mom, may I share something that has weighed heavily on my heart?" Her eyes flickered with curiosity and an air of reluctance. "I think our conversations have often been overshadowed by disagreement, but I truly want to understand your perspective. Can we talk?" For the first time, I saw her relax ever so slightly, her body unclenching. "Okay, let's speak from our hearts, Marie. I want you to be happy, but I also worry," she said, vulnerability threading through her voice. It was then that I realized the power of breaking the cycle, acknowledging the hurt while stepping into light. My words flowed as I shared my journey and the lessons I had gleaned. By framing without judgment and grounding myself in empathy, we birthed a conversation around our fears, enriching the dialogue with understanding instead of discord. That night opened the pathways to healing. Perhaps it was our vulnerability blending into the delicate fabric of kinship that transformed the depths of our relationship. However, just as I felt the tension between my family, community, and myself begin to resolve, the ultimate test loomed. A life-altering decision awaited me, involving not just my commitment to advocacy, but to the fragile threads of connection that wove my journey together. The weight of choice and its incredible ripple effects beckoned me to reflect on both past and present as I steered toward a confronting revelation. As the warmth of newfound connection with my family brought a sense of healing, a darker cloud loomed on the horizon. A few days later, I received a call from a local activist group dedicated to advocating for women's rights. They informed me that a prominent health facility in our community was hosting a panel discussion on reproductive rights, and they wanted me to represent the pro-life perspective. They saw me as a bridge, someone who had experienced the depths of despair surrounding abortion, but had emerged resolute in my beliefs. My heart raced, torn between excitement and worry. This was my chance to use my voice on a larger stage, yet it felt like stepping into a lion's den. I knew the discussion would be intense, a battleground filled with passionate voices. I had made strides in my personal journey, and I wondered whether I was ready for the magnitude of such an opportunity. The day of the panel approached swiftly, and my nerves tightened the night before. I sat in my living room with Lucas, who was engrossed in a movie, his laughter filling the air with innocence. I watched him, realizing that his future might intersect with the political landscape I was about to step into. I prayed desperately for guidance, asking for clarity and courage as I prepared for the confrontation ahead. As the day dawned, I found myself arrayed in a blend of emotions. I arrived at the venue, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. Activists were setting up their booths, displaying pamphlets and signage, while I steadied my breath, my heart thumping against my ribs. I felt a sense of obligation coursing through me, a duty to those whose voices had been silenced. The panel discussion commenced amidst a packed audience, the air thick with charged debates. My fellow panelists included medical professionals, activists, and social workers who were well versed in their argumentative styles. When my turn finally arrived, I stood at the podium, finding strength in the vulnerability I had embraced over the past months. As I spoke, I connected deeply with each word, recounting my personal experience rather than presenting a rigid, ideological stance. The weight of vulnerability allowed me to humanize the complex issues surrounding reproductive choices, weaving in threads of compassion and understanding for those who stood on various sides of the discussion. Yet, as the conversation progressed, I felt the mounting tension rising. A palpable conflict simmered at the edges of the room. Voices yelled from the crowd, challenging my beliefs aggressively. A man near the front stood up, delivering a painful anecdote about his partner's struggle and the heartbreak of a lost pregnancy. "You don't understand what it's like to face that kind of choice, Marie. You're speaking from privilege," he shouted, a tempest of sorrow filling his eyes. The sharpness of his words struck like daggers, and I felt the urge to recoil but steadied myself. It was a moment of reckoning. Instead of retaliating defensively, I acknowledged the anguish in his voice. "You're absolutely right," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. I don't know exactly what you've gone through, and I cannot claim to understand the loneliness, pressure, or grief you've faced. But I believe that we can engage with our experiences and embrace all feelings without dismissing one another. The words hung in the air like a fragile truce amidst a tempest. Perhaps it was the shift in tone that allowed both sides to begin seeing the humanity below the facades. I felt the audience soften, even amidst the divide. I listened to the ensuing tales of loss and longing. Each story laced with heartache evoked a deeper empathy within me. While the discussion took many twists and turns, I continued to plead for the importance of creating supportive environments for women facing difficult choices. I urged us collectively to honor both the struggles of individuals and the potential of unborn children, framing the experience as a delicate balance between compassion and conviction. But even as I navigated these emotional waters, a persistent doubt flared to life within me. As the discussions began to flourish, I noticed members of my family in the audience, their expressions a blend of concern and curiosity. Would they still support me after this endeavor? I craved their acceptance as I ventured into deeper discussions. Yet my heart soared when I spotted the slightest nod from my mother, a flicker of acknowledgement that she understood. Perhaps she too had begun to see the complexity of such a painful journey. After the panel wrapped up and audience members approached me with gratitude for sharing my story, even those who disagreed, I felt a wave of hope, recognizing that every conversation held the power to spark new perspectives. As I left the venue, satisfaction and exhaustion mingled in equal measure. It felt like a delicate victory, potentially bridging gaps even as others widened. Yet my heart still clung to the questions surrounding my own identity and values amidst turbulent waters. But the real challenge arrived several days later. I was contacted by a news agency wanting to cover my story, intrigued by my unique stance on reproductive rights, citing the recent panel discussion as a pivotal moment for public dialogue. They wanted me to share my experience on live television. The invitation stirred a whirlwind of emotions. While a part of me felt honored to amplify my voice, another part feared the scrutiny it would invite. Would the world understand? Would my warm community cascade under the weight of judgment as headlines buzzed? It became a swell between fear and opportunity, multiplying the stakes that loomed ahead. As I wrestled with the decision, I found myself back at the brink of discovery. This journey had opened me to something transformative, but would I embrace the call to stand even more deeply in my truth? Through it all, a guiding principle emerged. Love and compassion would light the darkest corners of any conversation. I was reminded of my near-death experience, of the luminous light that embraced me. Perhaps it was time to step boldly into that light, to articulate that love more than ever before. With trembling hands, I finally accepted the offer, ready to prepare for this moment. This opportunity to share my truth with the world could either deepen the conversation or challenge everything I had come to know. And so, as I stood on the precipice of this defining moment, I felt the threads of conviction drawing me into the next chapter of my journey. One shaped by the choices I made, the love I stood for, and the hope I dared to share with others. As the day of the live broadcast approached, I felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. There was excitement about the chance to reach a wider audience, yet apprehension clung like a shadow. Could I convey my heart's message authentically while facing potential backlash? Each night, I rehearsed my talking points, ensuring I covered the profound elements of my story: my near-death experience, the love I felt for the unborn, and the compassion I aim to extend to women facing tough choices. The morning of the broadcast dawned, filled with an electric energy that surprised me. I arrived at the studio, the bright lights illuminating my path, creating a hall of mirrors with reflections of my emotions. As I waited in the green room, I met the host, a charismatic figure known for tackling contentious issues. She welcomed me with an understanding glance, her kindness soothing a bit of my anxiety. "Just be yourself today," she advised, her voice soft yet reassuring. "This is about your journey. The more honest you are, the more people will connect." The truth resonated within me. I felt the delicate balance of vulnerability and strength aligning as I pondered the impact I hoped to achieve. Once the cameras began rolling, the host kicked off the conversation with a series of questions aimed at uncovering the depth of my experience and beliefs. "Marie, you've had a unique journey that has brought you from disbelief to advocacy. Can you share what inspired this transformation?" As I spoke, the words flowed, and I recounted the moments that had changed my life irrevocably. The near-death experience, witnessing the lost souls of the unborn, and the love I felt. Every emotion spilled forth with passion, weaving hope into despair, connection into division. Yet, despite the warmth in my heart, the reality of the public sphere tugged at me. I knew critiques would follow, and as anticipated, reactions poured in instantly. Social media erupted with debates, extending from applause to downright hostility. Each post, each comment, acted like a mirror reflecting not just different perspectives, but also the culture of division we lived in. It was daunting, but there was something transformative about sharing my truth in that live broadcast. It wasn't just about my personal story. It was an invitation to the audience to reconsider their own beliefs and connect on a human level. I witnessed the power that storytelling contained, creating ripples of understanding amidst the fractures of our society. Back home, I sat down with Lucas, the world quieting outside our walls. He looked up from his toys, curiosity shining in his eyes. "Mom, are you a superhero for the babies?" I chuckled, his innocence painting a bright picture amidst the turmoil. "Not a superhero, buddy, but I am trying to speak up for them. Every life matters, and I want to help others understand that too." With every passing day, I seemed to find new outlets through which to share my story. I started writing articles, collaborating with pregnancy support organizations, and actively engaging in conversations that were filled with contention but also rich with potential for healing. Each interaction became a thread woven into the larger narrative of advocacy, allowing the voices suppressed by fear and judgment to surface through vulnerability. But as I ventured deeper into this path, I recognized a growing divide within myself. My mother continued to struggle with my mission, often dismissing my views during family gatherings. On one particularly tense evening, after another spirited conversation about my work, she looked at me with eyes filled with anxiety. "Marie, you need to think about the repercussions of your choices. I just worry that people will label you, and you'll lose who you are in the process." Her concern echoed painfully, amplifying the fractures that had existed in our relationship. I felt torn between the fearless advocate rising within me and the daughter desperately craving her mother's acceptance. "Mom, I am proud of who I am becoming. I am learning that love can exist even amidst disagreement. I'm willing to forge this path, not just for me, but for those who feel ignored. The air thickened with unspoken words, the weight of our differences hanging painfully between us. We parted ways that evening with a promise of more open dialogue, but the fear of alienation lingered. Fueled by my purpose, I began organizing community outreach initiatives, inviting people from all walks of life to share their experiences surrounding grief, life, and choice. The upcoming event felt monumental, a partnership with local churches to create a space for empathetic conversations about the sanctity of life. I hoped it could blend the pain of loss with affirmations of hope, a platform to navigate the often murky waters together. As the day of the outreach approached, my heart beat wildly with anticipation. I envisioned moments filled with connection, healing, and understanding. Attendees began arriving, each person carrying stories etched into their hearts, fraught with both pain and resilience. And then came the moment that would redefine not just the event but my entire journey. In the midst of sharing and listening, I spotted a familiar face among the crowd. It was Samantha, my old friend who had initially stood against my beliefs in the passionate debates we had once shared. Her eyes held a mixture of apprehension and curiosity as she approached me. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice laced with vulnerability. "I've been thinking about everything you've shared lately. I want to hear your perspective, Marie." In that small exchange, something remarkable happened. The barriers of the past began to dissolve as we both embraced our vulnerability. We stood together, not as adversaries aligned by our beliefs, but as human beings desperate to connect through our shared experiences. As the event unfolded, echoing with powerful conversations about courage, belief, and understanding, I sensed how deeply intricate our journeys were interwoven with the stories of others. Each shared experience highlighted the emotional landscape paved by every individual, reinforcing that every narrative has its place in the broader conversation about love, loss, and choice. In that moment of communion, I realized my journey wasn't just about sharing my truth to advocate for the unborn. It was about embracing the sacredness of every story and honoring the threads that connected us all as human beings. As the evening concluded and the stories wove a delicate tapestry of empathy, I felt love blossom where once division thrived, a quiet reminder that healing is never solitary. It flourishes in connection. The light I had glimpsed in my near-death experience began to illuminate the path ahead, guiding me back to a deeper understanding of unity amidst a diversity of beliefs. But as I merged back into this collaborative space, I could feel the next challenge lurking in the shadows, resistance from those who still refuse to engage with empathy and fear the unknown. Little did I know, the lessons I had learned were merely laying the groundwork for the real test of faith, resilience, and love that awaited just around the corner. As the outreach event wrapped up and people began to say their goodbyes, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment course through me. Faces that had once appeared skeptical now bore expressions of understanding and connection. Many attendees lingered, engaged in quiet conversations, sharing their stories with one another, a beautiful testament to the power of empathy and shared experiences. But just as I began to relish this moment of triumph, a sudden wave of anxiety washed over me. I was reminded of the hurdles that still lay ahead. I was aware that not everyone was on board with my message, and opposing voices could easily erupt at any moment. When I checked my phone later that evening, I saw a barrage of notifications. To my dismay, several critical social media posts gained traction, labeling me as radical for hosting a pro-life event. The backlash was swift and harsh. In the following days, the criticism grew louder. Some members of the community who previously had shown support began to express their disapproval publicly, and others turned on me, echoing sentiments of betrayal or misunderstanding. The threads of acceptance I had woven with so much effort now seemed fragile, and the hostility weighed heavily on my heart. Yet amidst all this turbulence, a voice within me urged me to remain steadfast. One evening, I sat down to write a response, one that I hoped could bridge the gap between my newfound understanding and the skepticism that had taken root. I composed a heartfelt message, acknowledging that while I had chosen a path advocating for life, I did not wish to dismiss the profound complexities surrounding women's choices. I emphasized the need for compassionate dialogue, reminding everyone that no single story represents the entirety of the human experience. I published the message, and surprisingly, it drew a significant response. Not just criticism, but also messages from those who expressed a desire to connect, to understand the varied dimensions of my journey. I felt a glimmer of hope spark alive amidst the storm, but I also understood that navigating this landscape would undoubtedly shape the future of my advocacy. However, this resurgence of criticism was no match for the resilience that formed within me through every encounter, every share of my story. It fueled a fire, propelling me into action and catalyzing the next phase of my journey. I began organizing a series of small round-table discussions, inviting people to come together in a safe environment where differing opinions could be shared openly. With each engagement, I made it a priority to listen more than I spoke, creating space for others to express their anxieties and beliefs surrounding motherhood, loss, and choice. It became apparent that there is power in hearing others' journeys and in humanizing what can often feel impersonal, like political debates on abstraction. In those raw exchanges, I watched as walls began to crumble. People shared stories I had never heard before, stories of hardship, hope, grief, and love. One woman, Sarah, shared her experience of making the heart-wrenching decision to terminate her pregnancy due to medical complications. The room hung in heavy silence as she narrated her anguish, and I felt a profound empathy blanket my heart. "I wish I could have saved my baby," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But I couldn't bear the thought of my child suffering. I had to choose love in that moment." Her words pierced through the resistance, illuminating a truth I had come to embrace. Every choice, no matter how difficult, often stemmed from a place of love, an understanding that was pivotal to bridging the divide among communities. But amid the breakthroughs, another confrontation loomed, one that was both deeply personal and laden with uncertainty. My relationship with my mother continued to weigh heavily on my heart. She remained distant, her dismissive remarks lurking like specters, threatening to undermine the joyous progress I had made. One evening, after gathering the courage to reach out once more, I invited her to join one of my discussions. To my relief, she accepted. On the night of the event, the gathering buzzed with openness and vulnerability, but I could sense my mother's reluctance. She sat among the attendees, arms crossed, a guarded expression on her face. As the conversations unfolded, I felt the growing tension between us. Her discomfort within a room bursting with emotions echoed the rift we shared. I addressed the group, sharing stories of light and loss. But when it came time for open dialogue, I felt a swift turn as my mother raised her voice. "Marie, How can you say that every choice comes from love when some women don't feel any other option? The air stilled around us, the collective breath of the room held in anticipation. My heart raced as I searched for words that would both honor her concern and communicate my beliefs. "Mom," I said softly, "I understand that there are layers of pain and complexity behind every choice, but I want us to explore what it might mean to create a space for love, support, and understanding rather than judgment." For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes, but it was quickly clouded by doubt as she retorted, "Your experiences don't invalidate the realities that women face. I just can't support the idea that there's always an alternative." In that vulnerable moment, we faced off not just as mother and daughter, but as two individuals rooted in fundamentally different beliefs. A war of words threatened to overshadow the hope of connection we so desperately needed, but rather than succumb to anger, I chose to reflect my heart's essence. "Mom, I want to honor your perspective. It pains me to see how entrenched we've become in our beliefs. I want our dialogue to create room for understanding, not division." Afterward, as we both retreated into silence, something shifted. Not resolution, but a glimmer of possibility. It planted a seed of hope. I realized that these conversations could lead us to new ground if we committed to engaging with love and vulnerability. Determined to advocate for a compassionate dialogue, I channeled that very spirit into future discussions. As we continued to host discussions in the community, I invited everyone to enter into this intricate tapestry of beliefs and understandings, to walk hand in hand through our varied experiences as we explored the shared humanity beneath them. Little did I know, this evolving journey would set the stage for the most profound revelation of all, a moment that would challenge my growth, beliefs, and everything that had led me to this point. The delicate dance of love, loss, and understanding was just beginning, preparing me for a pivotal choice that would redefine my path. As the community outreach continued to flourish, I felt a growing momentum in my work. Each roundtable discussion peeled back another layer of complexity surrounding the topics of life and choice, creating threads of understanding that were beginning to intertwine even the most resistant minds. People who once stood as adversaries were finding common ground, sharing laughter and heartache in a beautiful mingling of stories that felt both empowering and necessary. But amidst the progress, an unsettling question began to gnaw at me. What was my ultimate goal? Was it merely to advocate for the unborn, or was there a deeper calling that had yet to reveal itself? Each interaction left me invigorated but also hungry for a clearer direction. And then came the phone call that would thrust my journey into uncharted territory. I received an invitation to speak at a national conference, an event drawing both pro-life and pro-choice advocates. The organization behind it sought to introduce conversations aimed at bridging divides and fostering understanding. My heart raced at the prospect of sharing my story on such a significant platform, but my stomach churned at the potential backlash. Would my message be heard, or would it drown in the noise of polarization? After days of contemplation, I decided to accept the invitation. This could be an opportunity to raise awareness around the love, compassion, and empathy I had come to believe were the cornerstones of understanding. I spent endless hours crafting my presentation, weaving in stories of hope and pain, emphasizing the importance of shared narratives, stories living in the space between certainty and doubt. The day of the conference arrived, As I stepped onto the stage, an electric energy pulsated through the crowd. I could see a mix of eager listeners, skeptics, and those prepared to challenge my message. My heart thumped in rhythm with the weaves of possibilities before me. The air was thick with anticipation as I began to share the journey that had brought me to that very moment. "I stand here not as someone with all the answers," I began, my voice steady. "I've walked through darkness, faced my fears, and emerged with the conviction that every life matters. Yet the journey to understand that truth is fraught with complexities. I believe that it's not about choosing sides, but rather about choosing kindness, compassion, and dialogue that honors everyone's story." As I shared anecdotes of individuals who had faced tough choices as well as moments of vulnerability that had led to profound insights, I felt the palpable tension in the room soften. Audience members began to lean in, their focus sharp. But then, the critical turning point arrived. An audience member from the back stood up, her expression fierce, an older woman with unmistakable conviction in her voice. "Are you going to tell us that every child deserves life? What about the lives of women who are suffering? You're not addressing the pain." A hush fell over the crowd. I could sense the weight of her anguish, an echoing sentiment from countless discussions I had shared. A moment of silence passed as her words hung in the air. I took a breath, grounded in empathy, and chose to engage her truth without defensiveness. "Your pain is valid, and I recognize that so many women face unimaginable circumstances," I replied, locking eyes with her. "Going through this anguish is a reality that should never be dismissed. This is precisely why we need spaces where dialogues can emerge, where we challenge one another with our truths rather than shutting them down. My message isn't to ignore the unfortunate realities. It's an invitation to explore alternative paths together." The room felt electric, resonating with nuanced reflections that merged vulnerability with advocacy. Slowly, others began to join in, recounting their experiences and struggles, bringing forth the shades of gray in a conversation often seen in black and white. Through that exchange, I recognized the vital importance of not only acknowledging the realities of women facing difficult choices, but also building community to support them, bridging suffering with the promise of hope. It was about creating a realm where every story could coexist, paving the way for healing to emerge amidst disagreement. As the conference drew to a close, I felt a surge of hope as audience members caught the light of possibility in one another's eyes. Many approached me afterward, eager to continue the conversation, to share their own stories, and perhaps begin the bridge toward further understanding of our collective experiences. Returning home felt surreal. There was a sense of waiting for me after the whirlwind discussions. My phone buzzed with messages of thanks and even new partnerships forming from the sparks of discourse ignited at the conference. But as the dust settled, I found myself facing an unexpected emotional tumult. The next morning, my mother called, her voice hesitant yet tinged with curiosity. "Marie, I watched your speech online. I was taken aback by how much you've really grown. I didn't realize the depths of your understanding." Her admission punctuated the air, reverberating with unspoken threads of connection that I had longed for. "Mom, I appreciate your courage in saying that. I want you to know that my journey doesn't lessen the pain felt by those who struggle with their choices. It actually deepens my resolve to create a compassionate community together. It's always been about relationships," I emphasized gently. However, as my feelings of victory settled, I was blindsided by a sudden pang of desperation. The ideal of compassion I had fostered in my journey now loomed overhead, flashing into inevitable personal challenges. I pondered how to encapsulate this new evolution of my beliefs into actionable change, not just in larger conversations, but in the everyday struggles hovering in my family, particularly with my son. Caught between love for my advocacy work and my desire to nurture Lucas in understanding compassion, I wrestled with a mountain of uncertainty. But I was determined. The next chapter of my journey beckoned me to confront the realities of motherhood, faith, and the cascading impact of choice in a more personal light. As I reflected deeper, a realization unfolded before me. Perhaps the answers I sought would not lie solely in words, but rather in living out the love I preached. And so, with renewed spirit, I set forth not just as an advocate for the unborn, but as a mother navigating the path of compassion and understanding, a profound calling to articulate how that notion might translate into raising Lucas in a world filled with complexity and nuance. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the task ahead. The challenges that awaited me were merely an opportunity to continue weaving the tapestry of connection and compassion, forever intertwining the lessons learned from every heart touched along this transformative journey. Yet I could sense that an even more significant test was on the horizon, one that would challenge not only my convictions, but also reshape the very fabric of my beliefs in a way I had yet to fully comprehend. As I immersed myself deeper into this path of advocacy, I began to notice the intricate balance between my work and my role as a mother. My resolve to foster compassion and understanding in my son Lucas became a core part of my daily intentions. I found ways to discuss difficult topics, death, choices, and love, through stories and age-appropriate conversations, helping him navigate the complexities of life with empathy. One weekend, while I was working on organizing the next community discussion, Lucas approached me while I sat at the dining table deep in thought. "Mom, why do you always talk about sad things at the meetings? Can't you talk about happy things?" His innocent query pierced my heart, reminding me of the fine line I tread between promoting awareness and protecting his childhood innocence. In that moment, I understood the importance of integrating joy with the heaviness of the conversations I was having. "That's a great point, buddy," I said, kneeling to his level. "Sometimes we have to talk about sad things to make the world better, but I promise we'll also talk about the good things too. Both are important." Lucas smiled, and I could see hope in his eyes, prompting me to reflect on how to present a balanced narrative about life, highlighting love, unity, and the beauty that sometimes gets overshadowed by the harsh realities. With each passing week, I endeavored to set aside time to enjoy simple moments with Lucas. Crafting, storytelling, and exploring the outdoors. I introduced him to stories of heroes who had fought for justice and kindness, intertwining them with the gentle narratives of compassion and understanding. I wanted to cultivate a worldview in him that embraced both hope and reality. As my community involvement blossomed, anticipation grew over an upcoming panel I had organized, where we would discuss the importance of supporting women through pregnancy, loss, and choices. This event held the promise of bridging even more gaps and fostering a stronger community of support. However, as the day approached, I felt a sharp resurgence of doubt laced with fear of criticism. The battles from past discussions replayed in my mind. The mixed reactions I'd received were still fresh, and the thought of facing dissent again made my stomach twist in knots. I spent the night before the event pacing my living room, the walls closing in on me. Eventually, I reached out to my mentor Lisa, who had been a guiding light throughout my journey. "Marie, remember that change is often met with resistance, but these conversations are crucial," she urged over the phone. "Focus on your intent. Create a space that breathes life into understanding. Others will resonate with your truth. Just be yourself." Her words rekindled the fire within me, and as dawn broke, I prepared myself to step into that space of authenticity and compassion, navigating through the complexities of conversation. I hoped the event would open hearts and minds and perhaps shift some skepticism into understanding. The day of the event arrived, and I felt the familiar flutter of excitement and anxiety. The venue was buzzing with energy. Participants mingled, exchanging stories and laughter, and I took a moment to breathe it all in. As the discussions commenced, I facilitated open dialogue among panelists from diverse backgrounds, emphasizing the importance of shared experiences across the spectrum of choice. Midway through the discussion, an audience member stood up to share her story. A young woman, visibly emotional, recounted the challenges she faced when navigating her pregnancy against overwhelming odds. "I felt so alone and scared. I wish I had known I was supported," she exclaimed, her words igniting a compassionate response from the audience. Tears glistened in many eyes as nods of understanding transpired in the crowd. The atmosphere became palpable. It was as if we were standing together in a collective embrace, united through shared stories and a deep yearning for connection amid our differences. This was the essence of compassion in action, and it lit a spark in my heart. Yet just as the air felt thick with empathy, the tension returned with the arrival of an opposing figure, an activist known for her staunch pro-choice stance who had been critical of my advocacy work. She entered the room, arms crossed, her demeanor rigid, and I braced myself for the fallout. As she took the mic, a wave of discontent rippled across the audience. "I appreciate your efforts, but let's not forget that you cannot claim to support women without addressing their actual needs," she challenged, her voice cool and unwavering. The audience shifted and I felt a tinge of apprehension, but instead of shutting down the conversation, there emerged a spark of hope and courage. "You're absolutely right," I said, my heart pounding as I turned to her. "It's vital that we listen deeply to the needs of women, especially those who are facing difficult choices. I welcome your perspective, and together we can explore how to better support them." The conversation transitioned into a rich dialogue of differing perspectives, each voice contributing to the narrative. While our beliefs diverged, the willingness to engage openly allowed us to highlight fundamental truths that resonated deeply. Love exists in the act of listening, and compassion can bridge divides. As the evening concluded, I felt an embrace of something new, an understanding that while we may not always see eye to eye, we could still stand shoulder to shoulder in our humanity. There was a new commitment to learn from one another, to move beyond judgment, and to advocate for comprehensive resources for women across the spectrum of choice. With renewed hope, I left the event alongside Lucas, who had been playing quietly in the corner during the discussions. As we drove home, I could feel the warmth of transformation radiating from our shared experiences. "Mom, that was really cool. I liked the stories," he said, his eyes shining with innocence. "Thank you, Lucas," I responded, smiling. Stories have a way of connecting us. They help us understand each other better. As we pulled into our driveway, I realized that this journey was leading me to cultivate not only compassion in the community, but also to embrace new understanding within my family. In the quiet of my heart, I felt propelled toward a courageous conversation with my mother, loaded with questions and newfound hope. It was time to invite her into this world I had created, a mix of stark realities and promises of love. But in that anticipation lay the tension of uncertainty. The upcoming conversations would challenge everything we stood for, not merely as individuals, but as a family. Little did I know that the next few days would bring matters to a head, unearthing both deep wounds and the potential for healing nestled within the shadows. My journey was about to take a significant turn, one that would illuminate not just my path, but also the path of my family, drawing us further into the complexities of love, loss, and the lives intertwined in between.